Taiwan fires warning shots at a drone near Kinmen after President Tsai orders the military to take strong measures against Chinese provocations. A man wrongfully imprisoned for the murder of a taxi driver has his conviction overturned, ending a 15-year battle for justice. Staying on top of the chip business, why it's getting harder and harder for Taiwan to compete. And Taiwan says it wants to attract hundreds of thousands of foreign workers, but is the country ready to accept them? A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Taiwanese soldiers have fired warning shots at a Chinese drone that breached the offshore islands of Kinmen, a part of Taiwan's territory. It's the most aggressive response Taiwan has taken since China began sending unmanned aerial vehicles close to the islands in the wake of US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit in early August. Bing Wang reports.
Taiwan's military fired warning shots at a Chinese drone on Tuesday in Kinmen, an island between the two countries under Taiwanese jurisdiction. It's the first time Taiwan has responded this way to a Chinese incursion. The shots came after Taiwan's President Tsai ordered the military to present countermeasures to the recent rise in China's drone flybys around Taiwan. More than 20 Chinese drones have flown near Taiwanese territory since U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei earlier this month. That was seen by Beijing as a provocation against its One China principle. Beijing sees Taiwan as part of its own territory and has not ruled out taking the island by force.
我们不会让对岸有不当的借口来制造冲突。我们不会挑起战端，我们自我克制。 但不表示我们不会反制。我已经下令国防部适时采取必要而且强力的反制措施，捍卫国家的领空安全。
The countermeasures include firing of a warning shot, reporting the incursion, expelling the drone, and if all else fails, shooting the unmanned vehicle down. There's a lot of support for the president's orders among Taiwanese officials and military experts.
我绝不允许任何无人机进入到我的军事范围，守土有责，击落无罪。
利用包括就是干扰枪捕捉，或者是说特殊的机具把它撞毁。
Taiwan's Air Force also announced the purchase of 4 unmanned aerial vehicles and other weapons from the U.S. at a total cost of almost $560 million US. All this with the aim to deter further Chinese incursions into Taiwanese territory. Damien Lin and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's military is holding exercises focused on airdropping military vehicles. Footage shows Taiwan's army dropping Humvees in the southern city of Pingdong. Humvees are usually used to transport troops and equipment and to supply ground soldiers in a combat scenario. Taiwan's military has stepped up combat readiness exercises since a visit from US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at the start of the month. It triggered Chinese military drills around the area. A man who spent more than 8 years in jail for a murder he didn't commit has had his conviction overturned. Ryan Hoker-Patrick reports.
A 15-year-long wait for justice finally comes to an end as 45-year-old Yin Khvat is acquitted of murder. Lin was convicted of killing a taxi driver in 2007 and sentenced to life in prison by a court in the southern port city of Kaohsiung. He always maintained his innocence, and nearly a decade later, his appeals were finally accepted. Lin was released from prison pending a retrial. Despite being found not guilty the following year, appeals by the prosecution saw the case drag on. But this week, the Supreme Court rejected the latest of those appeals, confirming Lin's acquittal.
不可能找到案发现场监视录影影像的凶手长发披肩的发型，现场的客观事证，如枪弹、毛发以及指纹等等，经过查证及鉴定的结果，都跟被告无关。
Lin's acquittal comes thanks to years of work by pro bono lawyers with the Taiwan Innocence Project, which aims to address the issue of wrongful conviction in Taiwan. They say the weakness of the evidence was just one problem with the case against Lin, who had no connection to the man he was convicted of killing.
我们很希望法院的判决内容可以交代，并不是罪证不足以判决林金贵有罪，而是林金贵并没有涉犯本案。
Lin's case wasn't the only wrongful conviction overturned in Taiwan this week. Sun Ho-sung, a fishing boat captain in the nearby port of Donggang, was acquitted after 8 years, wrongfully imprisoned on drug trafficking charges. A Kaohsiung court found at retrial that there was no evidence connecting Chun to the operation, and the prosecution's appeal was similarly knocked down by the Supreme Court. Ryan Hill-Kilpatrick for TaiwanPlus.
The governor of the US state of Arizona is in Taiwan on a trip aimed at strengthening and expanding trade relations. Doug Ducey is the second US state governor to visit Taiwan this month, following the governor of Indiana. Ducey will meet with President Tsai and leaders of semiconductor companies. Ducey says he's in Taiwan to talk about semiconductors. He'll visit chip-making companies in a bid to expand cooperation between his state and Taiwan. Last year, bilateral trade between Arizona and Taiwan was worth almost $2 billion. Taiwan's semiconductor giant TSMC is building a $12 billion plant in Arizona. Taiwan's dominant role in the production of semiconductors helps power the country's economy. But industry leaders say they are facing mounting risks, such as rising costs and moves by other countries to develop domestic production supplies. Louise Watt reports.
Taiwan produces more than 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors, or chips, that end up in smartphones, supercomputers, and even fighter jets. Now, the country's top manufacturer, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, is racing to develop even more cutting-edge technologies, smaller than the 5-nanometer chips, currently the most advanced on the market.
2奈米我们会在2025年就开始量产 ，density 还是最小的 ，performance 是最好的。
The move comes at a time when governments around the world are looking for ways to reduce their dependence on global supplies in favour of more secure options closer to home. And countries are investing in building up and subsidising their own chip industries, which could make it harder for Taiwan's chip makers to compete.
每一个国家的政府都说，他希望半导体的工厂到他们那个地方去制造 ，including US。including Japan, including EU, including mainland China, not including Taiwan. 就是所有的 cost 会急速的增加，我们只能够继续合作来降低这样子的风险。
Earlier this month, US President Joe Biden signed the CHIPS Act, $50 billion in subsidies to boost domestic production. Analysts say policies like these will have a significant impact on the cost of chips everywhere.
在欧美当地的一个生产比重的提高，而使得全球的一个晶片价格都会面临比较昂贵。那么中长期来说，也有可能会上涨35%到65%。
If costs go up for chip makers, that could be bad news for Taiwan's economy, which is heavily dependent on exports. But despite the uncertain outlook, analysts say TSMC could see a 10% growth in revenues next year because of orders from Apple and demand for TSMC's 3-nanometer technology, which is expected to enter production soon. Klein Wong and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's state-owned flag carrier China Airlines has agreed to buy 16 Boeing 787 Dreamliners. The purchase was approved just months after US Senator Lindsey Graham asked Taiwan to buy the planes, which are made in Graham's home state. But the government says the decision had nothing to do with political pressure. Stash Butler reports.
We hope you buy the 787.
US Senator Lindsey Graham's words to Taiwan when he visited in April. Fast forward 4 months, and Taiwan's state-owned airline says it will spend more than $2 billion to buy 16 of the Boeing planes. The transport minister says China Airlines planned the purchase back in 2018.
主要还是在于华航就它营运，还有这个飞机对它公司营运的帮助有多大所做的一个决定哈，也没有什么压力了，因为一个飞机进来还是一个长久的经营哈。 也不会说为了短期的压力就来做这样的决定。
But a former pilot says swapping China Airlines Airbus planes for 787 Dreamliners will mean higher training costs. Zhang Zihao says Dreamliners are also more expensive.
可是没想到最后还是采购了787。我相信这个它的这个成本上的一个耗损哈，还有燃油哈，燃油，因为毕竟还是空巴，相对来讲它的燃油省油性是比较强的，所以这样子的一个结果，其实让我们航空界来讲是蛮意外的。
China Airlines is defending the decision. It says it carried out a full analysis of the design and operational benefits. Deliveries for the wide-body Dreamliner will start in 2025. Whatever the reason for the sale, it's a boon for Boeing after years of financial troubles and a win for producers in Lindsey Graham's South Carolina seat. Damon Lin and Stash Butler for TaiwanPlus.
Police in Taiwan are blaming poor communication for an incident in which an officer allegedly refused to help the father of a human trafficking victim. The man's son is one of hundreds of Taiwanese who've been lured to Cambodia with promises of high-paying jobs, only to be conned by human traffickers. The father says that when he sought help from local police, an officer told him to go to a lawmaker instead. But the National Police Agency says it was miscommunication. It says the officer was only giving an example of what steps the father could take. The agency says it deals with all cases of human trafficking it receives. After paying a ransom, the son was released and is now in quarantine back in Taiwan.
车手在家里收钱啊，报案归报案啊，付钱归付钱，人平安才重要。
Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for a man charged with murdering 4 people in a shooting spree at a biotechnology company in Nantou County last month. Li Hongyuan shot 5 people in the head in what investigators say was a deliberate act of revenge against his former co-workers. 4 of the victims died, 1 was critically injured. After the 55-year-old was arrested in Taichung the day after the killings, he turned to the TV cameras and shouted to reporters, "I killed for revenge." Taiwan plans to attract 400,000 foreign workers over the next 10 years. According to Gong Mingxin, the head of Taiwan's National Development Council, new arrivals would help fill the gap left by Taiwan's aging population and declining birth rate. But is Taiwan ready to bring that foreign talent in? James Chater takes a look at Taiwan's efforts and obstacles to internationalization.
French national Johan is packing up his life in Taipei. He arrived here last year on a gold card, a visa launched by Taiwan in 2018 to attract highly skilled foreign professionals. But after 6 months of dead-end job applications in cybersecurity sales, he's going back to Singapore, where he used to live.
I went through a lot of interviews with different companies and through the process, but it went nowhere. And every time I faced the same kind of issues, I realized that actually it will be pointless to me to continue to try to find a job in Taiwan.
Johan speaks Mandarin and has 15 years of experience in international companies. But despite his gold card giving him the right to work in Taiwan, he said businesses here were still reluctant to take him on.
Where it's lacking, it's the difference between bringing the foreigners, giving them the visa, the working permit, but the companies are actually not really looking at hiring them.
Internationalizing Taiwan is a key policy of Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP. To achieve that aim, they want to make Taiwan bilingual in Mandarin and English by 2030 and launch programs like the Gold Card. It's a policy with particular significance for the country. Taiwan's population is aging rapidly, and it's often isolated from the international stage at China's behest. Beijing claims Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory and opposes recognition of Taiwan by other countries.
Integrating Taiwan with the world is critical for the government here, but foreigners in Taiwan and those trying to get here say reticence to change and trudging bureaucracies are thwarting Taiwan's internationalization.
The general will isn't there. I'm not sure if it's the will to upend these bureaucratic processes and streamline them and make them work well enough. They don't necessarily see the need to upend the system.
Chasen Daly has been helping English teachers and other professionals come to Taiwan since the pandemic began.
It's definitely much easier from the government perspective to create something like the Gold Card than it is to institute, very deep systemic changes.
But beyond systemic change, Michael Fahey, a lawyer based in Taiwan for 30 years, says the reality of simply doing things differently may be a hurdle.
When businesses and individuals and schools and other institutions actually have to implement internationalization, I think that shock and resistance that people sometimes have is the biggest obstacle.
While those barriers remain, some professionals feel other countries in the region are a better place to develop their career.
Taiwanese companies have been very local for years, so there needs to be a change of mindset, there needs to be a change of a culture that needs to happen, and which doesn't happen overnight, right?
But until it does, some people may not come to Taiwan to work in the first place, and those already here, like Johan, may bring their time in Taiwan to an early end. Chris Marr and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
For the government's response to our report, James Chater spoke to Lin Zhimei from Taiwan's National Development Council. She's responsible for government policies designed to attract foreign professionals to Taiwan, like the Gold Card.
We spoke to one French gold card holder who said he was deciding to leave Taiwan after about 8 months here because he couldn't find work, and felt that although the policy did help people get to Taiwan, that there wasn't enough support for people finding jobs once they were actually here. How would you respond to such criticism?
因为一开始我们比较认为说，这样子这么优秀的专业人才，那大概在国内有一些又有一些那种比较国际的一些企业，好像所以我们比较没有在想到说，他们会来这边在找工作上有一些困难。但是我想说，那个有时候跟领域别有关啦，因为有些毕竟台湾发展的一些产业，好，那而且他们可能的确期待的这个待遇是比较高的。我们目前就是我们会一个做法，就是我们也希望开始去建立跟厂商的这个联系，好，所以我们也包括对企业有做一些宣导，就是说我们现在有这样的人才，我们就业金卡办公室，我们这边他也不断的去跟企业做一些就是一些拜访啊，或者我们跟企业建立一些管道。
你觉得政府可以鼓励一些台湾的公司，或是不管是公司或是机构或者不同的企业来接受国际化这件事情？你觉得是政府可以做到的事情？
台湾是非常需要跟国际链接的哈，那我们的产业的发展才可以确保我们的国力。那当然因为要国际的产业发展，所以我们也需要很多的国际的外国的专业人才。我觉得就是我们产业要提升啊，我们要转型，我们要提升。毕竟台湾原先就是很多的是中小企业90%多，那的确那样子的企业要用这样高端人才有限。好，那我们就是希望要更多的产业国际化，更多的产业。就是现在我们有利的一些，不管是我刚才讲的半导体，或者我们强项的一些产业发展，那方面的话，就是说跟一些国际合作，或者我们更多的这种贸易的这种角色，那我觉得才会让台湾有更多高级的工作机会啦。
Coming up here on TaiwanPlus, a fishy business, the government's solar panel project that's come under fire from environmentalists. Details after the break.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please make sure to download the TaiwanPlus app.
A beautiful yellowfin tuna. 我放下来太重了，没吃个猪肉，才看到猪找路啊。Very nice.
OK，
好。
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Taiwan has lent fish farmers almost $300 million to build solar panels over their ponds. It's part of an initiative that the government hopes will help the country reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But environmental groups say building the panels without proper checks is a threat to local ecosystems. Stash Butler reports.
Taiwan's coastal plains are dotted with countless fish farms. The government wants to use that land to generate power by installing solar panels on top. But the shallow ponds are also nesting grounds for some of Taiwan's most unique bird life, and environmentalists say setting up solar farms would put their homes in danger.
它会造成所谓的栖地破碎化，那这些鸟类它们可能就会开始回避这些区域，减少这些区域，而进而整个栖地去丧失。
Other campaigners worry the lack of regulation is creating a wild west of solar development.
特别更重要的是总量管制，我们认为一定要有总量管制，你不能一开始一下子就放太多哈。
They say the government is giving fish farmers a free pass to build on the roofs of indoor farms, even in areas which could pose an environmental risk.
它可以肆无忌惮，想盖哪里就盖哪里。在关注前管区，应该是连户外型都要做严格的要求，那室内型应该是根本不能进去的。
The groups are calling on the Agriculture Council to lay out clear rules for installing panels on farms. They want more green energy for Taiwan, but not at the cost of its ecosystems. That's Naya Zhou and Stash Butler for TaiwanPlus.
The United Nations is appealing for $160 million to help Pakistan cope with catastrophic floods that its Secretary General Antonio Guterres has described as a monsoon on steroids. The devastating floods have killed more than 1,000 people and affected 33 million others. Dramatic images have emerged of buildings crumbling into raging torrents of water. Huge volumes of water are pouring into the Indus River, which flows down the middle of the country. Pakistan's climate change minister says that almost a third of the country could end up underwater. Tributes have been pouring in for Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, who has died at the age of 91. Gorbachev, who led the USSR from 1985 until its collapse in 1991, died after a long illness, according to a statement issued by the Central Clinical Hospital in Moscow. He set out to revitalize the USSR's communist system, but his reforms ultimately led to the collapse of the Union into 15 separate states. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990 for his role in ending the Cold War. 4 years later, he visited Taiwan and praised its transition from authoritarian rule.
台湾的选择一种民主的改革，值得我们的注意，而且对等的评价。这是整个世界共同体的一个财产，一个财宝。我愿祝各位幸福和获得成功。
Imagine a school where you can arrange your own learning schedule depending on your career goals. It's becoming a reality for some students in Taipei who are part of a new digital experimental high school, or T-School. Yu Jinghuang has more.
Lin Jiajun is one of the 48 students that joined Taipei's experimental school in the end of August. It's just his second class, but Lin is already sharing his ideas about the changing public transportation system. He says it's an observation he made with the freedom he now has outside of a traditional classroom.
我们是每个礼拜都有不一样的课表，给我弹性的上课时间，让我自己安排，是对我来讲非常有益的。
The city government says through a new way of learning, the students can explore their own potential and pursue the careers they are most suited for. Having a large component of digital-based classes also allows students to turn the entire city into a mobile classroom.
一般普通高中的我们的必修课，比如说国文、英文、数学，在所有学校会是选修。好，那我们的必修反而是像设计思考、数位时代、数位公民，对于他们未来的目标有自己的一些规划跟想象。所以这个学校的学生还可以提出个别需修课程。
For students at the T-School, the freedom to work out class schedules with their teachers is a valuable experience that they wouldn't get in the traditional school system.
很少学校会有女足这个东西，就是这所学校虽然也没有，但是能够找到的管道比较多。
The Education Department hopes that by giving students autonomy and allowing them to set their own learning trajectory, it will prepare them to become better leaders and citizens, particularly in a society where digital transformation is fast becoming a way of life. Rick Yi and Eugene Huang for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's Queen of Badminton, Dai Ziying, has retaken the top spot in the global rankings for women's singles players. It's her sixth time as the title holder. She returned to first place with her performance at the latest World Championships, which ended on Sunday. Though Dai finished in joint third place, she was able to overtake the top player due to changes to the ranking system brought on by the COVID pandemic. Usually rankings are based on scores during the previous 52 weeks, but the World Badminton Federation froze rankings after the pandemic began. A transition back to the 52-week system has only just started, and so some scores from as far back as 2019 are still factored in. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally, we leave you with images of animals at Taipei Zoo trying to stay cool in the summer heat. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.